out that this is the last week. This is the last time that I'll walk out and I'll stand here and say good morning like that. And I started thinking about our journey, how bizarre it's been. 18 years ago, I remember, and we started at River Ridge High School, and then after about 3.5 years, I stood in front of the people that were there at that time, and I said, this is our last service here. And now we're moving to a place called Nova. And so then we went there, and I remember saying at Nova, this is our last week here. Now we're moving to a place called Centennial Elementary School, and then we did that. And then I remember saying at Centennial, this is our last week, and we're moving to this place called Old Madison Elementary School. And then coming here, and it was kind of just fun, and it was neat to think about and all that. But in between services, I had the ultimate reminder of how beautiful this moment is, because I had walked into our student area where they're all jammed into this room over here, middle school, high school, where this is going to be their room as of next week. This will become now youth area in here. And I remember when I walked in and I saw Jonathan, I said, "Are you teaching?" He goes, No, I'm not teaching. And he pointed over, he said, he's teaching. And it happened to be a young man that when we moved into this facility, we did this weird thing. Before we laid the carpet here in front, right in front of this area, the stage, we had people come in and we said, if there's somebody that you know that's far from God that you're praying for, that one day you would want to see them in a intense, loving relationship with Jesus. We want you to just write their names on the floor, and then we're going to cover them with carpet, and we're going to remember that. I mean, they're going to always be like foundational for us. And so as I'm walking through the youth room, the kid that I had written his name is teaching today. I mean, and I just like, I'm just sitting there going, it was just kind of this fun thing I was doing. And then there he is, man, this guy, I just thought, this is what it is to journey together. Many of you weren't here during all those times and all that, but you're here now. You're here now. And while this is kind of fun and it's a little goofy, we're going from here to there, but the reality is it's about people, and it's about our God being faithful. So would you pray with me right now before I dive in? I'm a little verklempt. I'm going to I need this moment. Lord, I thank you for the way you break into our lives and you just show us things that we forgot of years and years, and for me, 10 years ago, Lord. And I remember now your faithfulness, God, your incredible faithfulness. I had even forgotten about that, Lord, but you reminded me today. And Lord, we remember today that in every one of these moves for us as a church, you have always been there. You have always been there. You have always been the one that was directing us, Lord. And I thank you, because that gives us crazy hope for tomorrow and for next Sunday and the next candlelight services and our next years and years, Lord, that we would have as long as you call us to walk with you on this earth. So thank you for that, Lord. Thank you that I get to talk about that right now. And I pray that you would bring power to the words that I'm going to share. Not for my sake, but for your glory. I pray this. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right. All right. Are you ready? Anybody want to talk a little Advent? Okay, so this is Advent. How many of you grew up doing Advent? Wreath camp. Wow, there's a lot more traditional people. In first service, there was like 10 people. A lot more of you here that have grown up doing Advent. We didn't as a family. We only started this here at Newbridge just a number of years ago. But this, whether it's a wreath or a circle of candles, I want to just talk to you. I'm going to pull the lens out a little bit before we specifically talk about the candle of hope. I want to take a bigger look at the picture because it's important to see how it goes together. Advent began roughly about 200 years ago as we know it. It took place in Hamburg, Germany. And there was an orphanage with a pastor named Heinrich. And so he was there, and every day as they approached Christmas, you know what it's like with kids, right? And they're getting closer to Christmas. And so every day, the kids would wake up, and they would run down the steps, and they would go into the food area, and Heinrich would be there, and they'd run up to him, and they'd say, "Pastor, is today Christmas?" And he would say, "No, it's not Christmas today, but we're one day closer. We're one day closer." Then they'd go up and they'd go about their business. And then the next day, same thing. Kids would wake up and they'd go running down the steps. And they'd say, "Pastor, is it Christmas?" And he'd say, "No, it's not Christmas, but it's one day closer. It's one day closer." And this happened again and again. And so the next year, in trying to remedy that situation, what Heinrich did was he built a 6-foot wreath. 6-foot wreath. And he put candles all the way around it. And then he set it up in this room. And when the kids would come running down and they'd say, "Is it Christmas?" And he'd say, "No, it's one day closer." And he would light a candle and he would read some scriptures about that, about whatever it was that he had put onto his heart. Through the years, it's boiled down to these candles that you see right here and the meaning that each one of them has. His goal in doing this was simply this: to build and to teach the children how to build and live with anticipation for the coming of Jesus. To live with anticipation for the coming of Jesus. Now, what a lot of people do not understand about Advent is really Advent is not just about the first coming. And by the way, there is a Latin word that we get Advent, and it's called Adventus, and the word means the coming or the arrival. The actual word means arrival. And so when we're talking about this, what we do is we celebrate the first arrival of God incarnate, and that was in Bethlehem. And so we talk, and we'll be singing about that this candlelight service on Christmas Eve, and we'll be doing all of that. But what Advent is really supposed to be about is turning our attention to the next Advent, or Adventist, the next arrival, which we call the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ. So if we believe that he came and that he was here and he was born of a virgin, and we talk about all these really crazy things, and sometimes it's so easy to forget how crazy this story sounds. I mean, born of a virgin, no room, on a donkey, riding through census, the whole deal. And we try to it just gets so normal for us. And so what we do is we look at this and we start to realize that when we talk about living in anticipation, that means that when we believe this to be true, there will be a sense of peace. Not only that he came, but that he's coming again. There is a sense of peace in us, that we are part of a much grander, much bigger story than ours by ourselves or our families. Then there seems to show up a greater joy that comes from that. And then today, we talk about hope. Our hope. Our hope that's built in the future. Our hope that he is coming again and he can be trusted in what he has said. This is the yakal that we wait for, that we saw in the video, that we long for and we hope and we wait for. So if you have your outline, I want to look at this biblical concept of hope, the biblical concept of hope. I'm going to try to give you today a couple of definitions and maybe some mental pictures. Unfortunately, when we say the word hope in English, it really does us a disservice. When we talk about hope, in the English language, it almost implies a level of uncertainty. You know what I'm talking about? So you're sitting there and you're interacting with somebody, and you look at them, they say something, you go, is that true? Is that really true? And they'll look at you and go, well, I hope so. Or you go, give me my phone, I'll Google this. You know, I mean, that's what I'm going to find out if this thing is true. And so we talk about, in the English language, there's that uncertainty part of it, where biblically it is not the case. I've been reading and studying a lot of different authors, different definitions. Tim Keller says it this way: hope, biblical hope, is life-shaping certainty of something that has not happened yet, but you know it will. It is life-shaping certainty that you are connected. See, listen, hope is always about the future. It is never about just the present or the past. It's about the future. And so what we hope for, when we know that something and we believe it to truly happen, you are connecting yourself with a better future, hopefully a better future. We are, in essence, hope-based creatures of life. What we believe about the future, I mean really, now I'm not talking about mentally, I'm talking about what we really truly believe about the future is going to determine how we live, our level of joy, our level of peace, and our level of hope. Because that's what it is really all about. I heard a story about this, and it was about these two guys that, it's a made-up story, but it's about these two guys that had, remember dirty jobs? Remember just picture the dirtiest job you can think of that they had. I think I remember one where these guys were going deep into the sewer system to unplug things, and it's just a horrible job. But whatever that worst job that you can think of, this is a job where there's no vacation time that's given, hours are awful, and for one person, they make minimum wage. There's two people doing this job. They get minimum wage. The other person doing exactly the same job has been promised that after 1 year, they are going to be given $1 million for doing that exact same job. So these two launch into this, doing this job, and as they're doing this job, I mean, it doesn't take long for the first person that's making minimum wage to just kind of look up and go, this is ridiculous. If I'm making minimum wage, I can find a way better job than this. And so within a month, they're gone, you know, probably looking for something else. And yet this person is coming to work every day with a smile on their face. This person's whistling all the way through and just having this great time, very simply because of hope. Because they know that their future holds for them something that they are basing all of this on, and that they know in 1 year I'm going to be able to get rid of this job, I'm going to be able to retire maybe for them, and they're just going to go in another direction. This is how hope influences our lives when we truly, truly believe something. It is a foreseeable future of something that's going to happen. And it does that very thing of motivating and shaping our lives. Now, when we talk about how this works on a spiritual God level, I want you to think of it this way. Now, our stage, this little stage that I'm on, it just goes from that corner right there to here. And I want you to think of this stage like a big timeline, Okay? Now, beyond this stage is what we're going to call eternity past. Eternity past. It just goes on and on and on, and there's no beginning. There's no end this way. But here, at the end of this timeline, at the end of this stage, we're going to call it Genesis 1. In the beginning, God said, let there be light. And this is the beginning of what we might call time. And God creates. And he starts creating everything that we know. And we say that because we know God always existed. And so now he's creating. And then as you move through, this is a time of prophets, and this is a time of prophecy, that there's this longing for hope that's going to come, and these people didn't understand it, but by the Holy Spirit, the very Spirit of God would whisper to people things about the future. about a child who would come, a child would be born, a son would be given, the government would be upon his shoulder, and he'd be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And they would get these crazy pictures. And they were just seemed to be random, and they seemed to be set up. And then one day, we'll call it right here, God enters the world, fulfilling all of these prophecies that no one could piece together, no one could fully understand. But one day, the Messiah, God, zips himself up into a human body and comes to this earth and is born in the stable in a place called Bethlehem. And he lives there for 33 years, not there, but he lives in Israel for about 33 years. And then he is crucified. He's given a false mock trial, and they hate him for drawing people to himself. And so because of all the unrest, he will die on a cross for the sins of the world. And that's right here. And then we begin the beginning of what's called the church age. The church age is theologically what you call this. The birth of the church in Acts chapter 1 happens, and then we find ourselves. Well, when you look at this timeline and you see that we're right now in this thing called the church age, and maybe here at the end of this is what we would call the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ. Where we find ourselves today is somewhere right in here. And I don't know. I don't know about proximity. It could be tomorrow. We could be standing on that line. But certainly when we look back, this is where we are at. We are back, and we are looking just like they look at a football game in the post-game show. You know what I'm talking about? And they have all the answers, don't they, in the post-game show? Oh, they should have done this. Oh, Russell Wilson, he's got too much on his back. We get into all that craziness. So that's easy to see. But for these people, all they had were these crazy little glimpses that didn't seem to fit together. And then this work of God doing this. And so when we watch this video about hope, how interesting it is that he's talking about the way you look forward is by looking backwards. We look backwards. That's how we see forward. And it's built on the character and the very nature of God. The very character and nature of God. In other words, God said all these things, and they couldn't figure it out, but there was this intensity as they waited and they hung on to him, and they lived through this. And now we can being that we're here, this all makes this perfect sense to us. And so now then when we turn our attention here and we go, but Mark, man, have you ever read the book of Revelation? Really, man? Come on. I mean, it seems like crazy time. Bulls and wrath and stuff flying. And I mean, this is nuts. And we feel often probably like they felt there. But I love the fact that Mackie in that video said this. He said, as he's talking about that, he's talking about the character of God. We'll look at that in a moment. We look forward by looking backward, trusting in nothing other than God's character. I think when you begin to understand how this plays out in our lives, you begin to see that, well, I don't know how all of these things are going to come together. And honestly, if you just forget this whole, in my little thing, my timeline is right here of my life. How often do I get to places where I go, God, what are you asking me to do? This makes no sense. It makes no sense in the picture and in the span of my life that I would even slightly believe in this thing. But we look back and we said they hung on. They waited for him. And so I want you to turn to a passage right now. It's in Psalm chapter 130. Psalm 130. It's page 545 if you're using one of our Bibles, just sitting there. And this is by a psalmist that is trying to paint this picture of the intensity that he waits with. The intensity. Psalm 130, and I'm starting in verse 5, and they write this. The psalmist says, I wait for the Lord. I wait and put my hope in his word. I wait for the Lord more than a watchman for the morning, more than a watchman for the morning. And he says it twice. And he doesn't say it twice because he's got a stutter. He says it twice because it is of such incredible importance that he is making a very strong point here. You see, the watchmen would be on the walls of the city, and they would, this shift, the night shift, the graveyard shift for the watchmen was the worst. You got the short straw if you ended up with that shift. And you would sit there and you would be looking out from the wall. And if you've ever been camping, it's the only thing I can get in my head that's close to this. But you know when you go camping and it's really, really dark and you're out there and you build this little campfire and you're sitting there and there is, if it's a really dark night, there is a ring of light around you. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe, depending on the size of fire, a 10-foot ring, 15-foot ring of light. And it almost seems, if you know what I'm talking about, is that when you get to the edge of that light, and if it's 10 feet, it's almost like you could be standing a foot into that darkness and these people wouldn't even know you're there. So it's kind of a weird feeling. Well, the watchman would sit there realizing that the entire city is at risk. They are the last line. They're on the wall and they're watching and they're trying to not fall asleep. They're trying to hang on. And so he says, no, I wait for the Lord like that watchman, the most stressed physician that there is, how they wait for the morning. They wait for the dawn. Knowing that now I can see. Now it's going to be greater. My vision is going to be farther. And this is what it means when he talks about this wait and this hope. That's why I love that old hymn. I mean, I grew up singing this old hymn called Solid Rock. And the words were, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and his righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but I wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. As we build this idea and this whole definition of hope, I read this one. I thought it was also interesting. The writer said, hope is the person or thing in which your expectations, if you're filling out those blanks, in which your expectations for the future are centered. What are our expectations for the future? What are the things that we build our lives on? That we center? It can be a relationship. I think of how many times, man, as you approach marriage, you think, boy, this person, I'm building my life. We're going to build our lives together. And maybe you've gone through something in your life where you thought, man, I'm going to build my life with this person. And then you found out that they didn't feel the same way. And all of a sudden, things shake. All of a sudden, that hope seems to be getting dashed. But you can do that. You can build your life that way. You can say a company, I'm with this really great, strong company, and they really take care of their employees, and they're going to take care of me, or my education, the skills that I've developed. I really believe in those skills. For some people, you know what they build their lives on? They build their lives on their looks. Nobody says that, but they build their lives on their looks. And their looks have opened doors for them, relationally and in all kinds of different ways. And you never really talk about that. But it's very much like the thing that you put your ladder against. Now, I know you were going, what? I had 3 people before the first service come up and say, hey man, you want me to take this out of here for you? They just thought we're building off. I said, no, I'm actually using this. Let me flip it around here. This is called an extension ladder. For most people, you understand fundamentally how this works. And really, when we talk about ladders, and when we talk about these kind of ladders, what they do is they basically just extend out. You just keep working and pulling on them, and they go up. And what you're doing in a situation like this, it's not of too much good until you get it up to where it can be leaning on something. And then, on top of that, there we go. And then, thank you very much. I am skilled at that. Actually, Doug Drainville and I, we live near each other, and we bought about a 34-foot ladder, which is a little bigger than this. And, coming from Southern California city boy, I didn't quite get the importance of what you put the ladder against. And so I learned that pretty quick because we live out of town, out in Tumwater, and we've got some old growth kind of things, and we've got some trees out there. And so what I would do is I would extend this 34-foot ladder all the way out and climb up this thing with a chainsaw, kind of hanging there. And so you're getting up there. But the crazy part of it is, at least here, you've got this flat area that it can lean against, where if it's a tree at the top, a tree has a point of about this much that it's resting on. Well, at the bottom, it's awesome. It's like, I do this all day long. But as you start going up the tree, and about the first time I went up there, and I'm standing, I'm kind of trying to hook my leg on this thing, and I'm ripping on this chainsaw, boom. And so it's just, you start realizing that what you put your ladder against is extremely important. And you don't tend to think about the things that you put. You don't think about the wall a whole lot. You see, when we're born, your ladder is against something, and you don't even think about it. What is your ladder against? Yeah, your mom. I mean, let's not play the games, Dad. No, Mom. It's all about Mom, okay, at that point. So the ladder is against Mom. And then as you grow and you're going farther in life, it becomes about, your friends. You start putting your ladder, trying to lay it against different things. And the ladder represents these expectations, these hopes, these dreams that you have for some of your life. And you just, like I said, you never even think about the wall that the ladder's on until you get up on that ladder and realize that it's starting to shake. You start realizing, I never think about these walls. I mean, these walls, church, you don't know how safe you are right now in this room. Because these walls are called cinder block walls, and they're blocks about this big probably, and then there's 2 big holes in the middle, and they're made out of concrete. And then because this was a school, what they did in all of these holes that go all the way down through these solid concrete cinder block walls, they put steel, rebar, all the way through every run. They put rebar. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they filled it with concrete, the holes. They filled it with concrete. That's why we could withstand that big earthquake a number of years ago. Well, one day, I was walking through the building, because I walk through every day when I'm here, just to see what they did today, and it's crazy. Well, there's this guy that works here. His name's Larry. Larry's a beast. Larry is the guy that gets up there and he does all the concrete work. So he cuts through these walls, through the steel, the concrete. So I'm in the back, and if you go to this little back hallway that we've just created that goes from the new cafe lobby area, it goes around the auditorium to Kids Bridge. Well, one day I was in there, and Larry was cutting on this wall, and he was there. I don't know if it's his wife or girlfriend, but Cinda is there with him, and they had cut about 4 or 5 feet out of this wall from the bottom. So the wall is just kind of like really strange looking. I thought, I never really think about this wall here. And so Larry goes, hey, come here, Mark, you got to see this. And he grabs the bottom of this wall and he goes, watch this. And he goes, and this whole solid, all the way up, it just starts going, And Larry looks at me and he goes, I've been doing this for like 20, 25 years. I've never been scared like this. And Cinda whacks him. And she goes, he's the pastor of the church. This is his, but don't. And I'm like, I've never thought about these walls. We don't think about the things that we put our ladder. We don't do it until it begins to shake. Until you get up there and that whole ladder and everything starts to move. You don't think until, you start to feel helpless, until you start to feel some despair in whatever it is, in a relationship that's gone bad, into a job that you thought was going to be there, and then all of a sudden you got laid off. Maybe for you it was thinking you had it all planned out and you were going to retire at this age, and then got nailed with a bunch of stuff and all of your investments fell apart and you realize I got to work another 5 or 10 years. I thought these people were going to be my friends, and I don't know about if I even believe in that anymore. The ladder starts to shake. You start wondering at points like this, what are you going to do? How does this thing work? And sometimes we do really crazy, crazy things. We were over at Nova. That was a couple of places before we ever ended here. And there was this one Sunday morning, true story, one Sunday morning, the ceilings were even higher than here, and there was a light that was out, and we really wanted to get it replaced because they didn't have a lot of lights. And so they found a ladder like this. It was an extension ladder, and they had taken it out and they had put it in the middle of moved the chairs out, and there was nothing. It wasn't tall enough to lean it against anything. And so somebody that they'll remain nameless, Dave Durr, but I'll never forget. I was standing there and we couldn't figure out what to do. And Dave just takes this ladder and he called a couple of people over and he goes, okay, just grab right here. And somebody grabbed on that side. This thing is not leaning against anything. And you got to know Dave. He's absolutely nuts. I mean, really. And Dave just goes shooting up the ladder. And I'm standing way back. I had just walked in. This is a Sunday morning, about a half hour before church starts. And I'm looking at him, and he's like, and these guys are just like this, hanging onto this ladder. And I thought, it's at least at moments like that, that you are in a very precarious situation. And when it comes to our hope, it is actually a great thing sometimes when, and I want to paint this picture for you, when sometimes the things that we based our lives on and the things that we put our hope in, maybe it's a person, whatever it is, that thing starts to shake. It is not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, in the book of Hebrews, it says this. God speaking at the end of Hebrews says this. He says, and once more, at the end of time, I am going to shake everything so that that which is unshakable might remain. And I love that. Because I want to know if I've got my ladder against a wall that I think is really strong, but Larry's gone not so strong, and I think in these two people, I want to know that. I want to know. And throughout the scriptures, we see that. We are instructed to put our hope in God. And you knew. That wasn't even a good punchline. You knew from the minute we started this service the preacher was going to say that. Put your hope in God. You knew that. But I think that there are some things that when it comes down to real life, they're what I call detours of hope. Now, I was going to call it hope killers. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to just call this a detour of hope. And I'll tell you why, because I've taken a bunch of these detours I'm talking about. And you know the beautiful thing about the God who I have come to know in his character and his heart is that he has been the one that has come along and said, you know, Mark, I'm going to let you just take this detour way out of the way. And you're going to come maybe to a dead-end road, or you're going to go way out of your way. But you may find that there's a way home. And maybe you're going down some of these detours, and I want you to know before I even talk quickly about them that there's a way home. Let's look at it real quick. I'm going to give you 3 detours and a door. First detour is this, what I call unbelief. The detour of unbelief. See, there's 2 ways to believe. I can go back to history and I can say, yes, I believe Jesus came 2,000 years ago in a stable in Bethlehem and he was born. I believe that he died, and I believe that, and that he's God, he's risen. I even believe that someday he may come back and all of that. But where we don't always get it, and I'm going to give you a spoiler alert here. This is for a candlelight service, but I'm going to give you a little, is that there's actually a 3rd advent. There's not just the first one and the second one, but there is an arrival of God where he comes to us. He will come to you one day. And it will be every bit as real as being born in a stable, and it'll be as real as that time. And I don't know, it might even be today for you. And you have to choose, what do I really believe? Do I believe all of this stuff intellectually, that all of this stuff happened? But there's going to be a point where you know that your life doesn't measure up to the very thing that you say you believe. We call that unbelief. I don't really believe that God knows best for what I want in my life because I know what I want. And so I'm going to keep that for myself. I'll make those decisions. Oh God, I'll come on a Sunday. I'll put some money in a box. I'll take a little piece of bread and some juice. I'm all over that. I get that. But man, I'm the one that inevitably is in control of my life. That's unbelief in the lordship of Jesus Christ. That will be a detour. And that will destroy, by the way, your hope. Because no wonder there's nothing to really hope for. Because if you're the one that's in control, you hope in yourself and that you've got it figured out. And most of us know we don't. Second detour is what I call complacency. People are so consumed with this life here and now. And they basically go, it's just, I'm just consumed. I got a lot going on. My kids are little and they're just cute. They're just cute right now. I mean, they're a little irritating once in a while, but most of all, they're cute, You realize I'm not talking about teenagers. They're cute, okay, right at this moment. And I got a good job, and I think things are happening. I love my wife, or I love my husband, and things are just, life isn't perfect, but it's moving. And you know what? No, I don't think a lot about the second coming of Jesus, and I just don't do it because this isn't that bad. There's some things I really want to do here. I'm liking this. I just don't. There's not a lot of hope there. In your blank there, just fill this out. Comfort drives complacency. You see, we've gotten comfortable. And when you find yourself in a really comfortable place, it can drive complacency. It drives it relationally when you get really comfortable with somebody. I feel like we're really locked in on this. A lot of times in the first few years of marriage, that's what happens. Man, the guy's in the hunt, and they're going to do, and I got the ring on it, and then all of a sudden, we get real comfortable. We don't try as hard. It can happen relationally, it can happen physically, it can happen financially, and it certainly happens spiritually. That's why I have a very, some would call it very twisted mind on death. Because of what I do, I'm around death quite a bit, and I've seen people that really kind of had things all laid out in their life, and they had a great financial plan and package, and it was all worked out, and they were just enjoying life, and it was wonderful, and they worked hard, and it was awesome, and then something happens, and something begins to go bad, whether it's cancer or whatever, it could be anything. And you see the deterioration of their body. You see the deterioration happening. And it's the ladder shaking. And I actually think that that's one of the greatest gifts. I know, and I'm sorry, if you have somebody that you know that's in the middle of this, I don't mean to be flippant. I really don't. But I'm telling you, in the scope of eternity, it is such a beautiful thing. When my dad had cancer, and it allowed us to have a couple of talks that we had never had in our entire life because his body was deteriorating. He knew it. He knew. And it wasn't about, hey, Dad, what's on your bucket list that you didn't get? That is so stupid when somebody's dying like that. Oh, yeah, my bucket list. Really? Good movie. Go watch the movie. But I mean, reality here is, oh, Dad, you can't die. You know how much money you've put aside and you and Mom wanted to. You don't talk about money. You talk about what your life was built on. You talk about the reality and the hope of the future and what takes place when you close your eyes for the last time. Complacency, thinking, man, I'll never die. I mean, I'm not even thinking about that. That's so far off. That eats away at our hope of the things of God inevitably. Last one is this, and I'll wrap up with this. Fear. Fear. Just turn quickly to John chapter 20. Page 963. John chapter 20. This is right after the resurrection. This is so cool. This is right after the resurrection of Jesus. They hadn't seen Jesus yet, but they had heard. There was some talk about what was going on. And it says this in John 20, verse 19, when it was evening of that first day of the week, the disciples were gathered together, notice, with the doors locked because they feared. The doors were locked because they feared the Jews. And Jesus came and he stood among them and he said to them, peace be with you. And having said this, he showed them his hands and his side. So the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. I love that because this is literal. This is what fear literally did to them. They were locked in a room. They were in a room with locked doors because they feared. See, what fear does is fear builds walls and then it locks the door and it locks us in. It says this, somebody once said, it establishes the limits. Fear establishes the limits of your life. And so if you're afraid of the outside, you stay inside. If you're afraid of heights, you stay low. If you're afraid of people, you stay alone. If you're afraid of being alone, you've always got to be around people. And if you're afraid of failure, you won't even try. But here's the crazy thing about this. They're locked in this room because they were afraid. They're locked up in their fear. And here's what it says. And Jesus appeared. If you read the other Gospels, it never says he unlocked, he jimmied the door, and he got in. It just says he appeared among them. This is his glorified body. He's been resurrected. I don't know. It just makes it sound like he just walked through the wall and he's right in the middle of their fear. Can you imagine that? What does that say about the character of your God? I know your fear. I know where you're locked up. You've done that. And I appear right in the middle of your fear. And he says this, peace. Peace. Look at my hands. Look at my side. I've been resurrected. I'm alive. There is a living hope in the midst of this. And whatever, I felt like this was the word for the day to me, to say to you right now, whatever walls that maybe you've built around your life, walls of fear. I don't have enough money. I don't have this. I don't have that. This relationship, this kid's going to... whatever this thing is, those walls of fear, the Lord wants to just step right into those today. Whatever the guilt is that you have built around you, the shame, the insecurity, he wants to walk right into it and speak peace. That's the door. I'm going to ask the band to come up right now, but I want to end with this. This is the door. And I really love this scripture. It's out of Hosea. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Hosea chapter 2, verse 15. And it says this. It says, and there I will give her back her vineyards. This is speaking of Israel when it says her. It says, I've given her back her vineyards. This speaks of the prosperity that she had once known, but now she was in captivity and all these things are happening. He says, I will now give her back her vineyards and make the valley of Achor a door of hope. The word Achor means trouble. What God is saying to them is, I am going to turn your valley of trouble into a door of hope for you. We look forward by looking back. And that's why we go to the table. That's why we celebrate these things that we celebrate. I want to pray before we go to the table today. So if you would just close your eyes for a moment. Some of you have been around for a while. You've been listening very intently. You've been studying the scriptures along with us, but you've never made that real commitment to Jesus Christ. You would say, I'm even at a point where I'm kind of starting to believe about this, and I think I believe that Jesus came historically and he died on a cross. But you've never said, I believe he did that for me. Today I want to invite you in. I want to invite you in to that living hope that we have in Jesus. Pray now that you would give us courage and you would open our eyes to this, Lord. We look back and we see so much so clear. Oh, that it would give us courage for our lives, Lord, that we could entrust them into your hands. That we could say that when we don't understand, we know you do, and we're just going to be in your word. We find our hope in your word, God, and what you bring to us. So today, if you want to do that, all you have to do is right there in your own seat. I don't want to embarrass you. It's just right there in your seat. All you need to do today is just say, Jesus, I receive that. I receive your forgiveness. I want to enter into that. I believe. And I don't believe just in history. I believe that you are my Lord right now, and I'm going to follow you. Forgive my sin, the way I've tried to do it myself all my life. And now, today, I trust you. If you prayed that prayer by the authority of God's word, I pronounce to you that your sins are forgiven. Your guilt is gone. Don't keep it any longer. It's washed away by the shed blood of Christ on the cross. We invite you into a celebration of life, a celebration of the death of Jesus that did this work. And even if that was your first time, please join us today. There are 4 tables, one in each corner of this room. And we're going to worship a little bit. We're going to restate some things. And as you feel